I really enjoyed this film. I didn't know much about the Mari culture before watching this, but after watching it, I feel like we have really gone in depth on this culture and where some of the performances came from and the meanings behind them. And especially watching this film, it shows the importance of it rather than just reading about it. The culture I grew up in was not similar to the Mari culture, and I think some people may have felt their culture is outdated or traditional, and traditional can be looked down upon now these days, but I personally love that they stick to their roots. I appreciate cultures in general that continue to do things as their ancestors did, even if it is modified a little. I appreciate that they filmed it from a female's point of view because it really showed Pica breaking down these culture and gender rules for women, because what they thought once only a man could do, she is showing that a woman can do this as well. And it showed that when the grandpa was waiting so long for a boy to come along and take the tribe out of the darkness, she came along and proved to herself and fought for herself and her people that she could be the one to do that. For prompt number 2, I saw a lot of connections throughout the film from the readings. The first one I'd like to point out is at the beginning of the ceremony when they were sitting down. It was during the scene where Pica sat at the front and the grandfather told her to sit in the back and she ended up leaving. It was when this first started, the grandmother was singing, and in one of our readings, it said that this was called a teonga because it was at the beginning of the ceremony. So according to our readings, it says that older women of tribes typically sing these at the beginning of the ceremony, and we saw this with Pica's grandmother, and then when Pica was walking in, she was singing back as well, which I didn't see that in the reading, but I thought that was really interesting. During this same time, in our readings, it says that in traditional Waita, they end by falling away vocally at the end of the final line because it's considered a bad omen or bad form for a song to be interrupted by breath. And in this same scene, we saw the grandmother doing this in the traditional Waita. She was falling away vocally at the end. Something else I would like to point out, another connection, is when the grandfather was teaching the boys about these performances. For example, when he said he was telling them how to extend their tongues and what they should be, what it's symbolizing, and he says it is supposed to make their enemies feel fear. In the video we watched, it said it was traditionally used in warfare to intimidate opponents, which the grandfather was really capitalizing on when teaching these boys, and that it was also used in hopes to scare the opponents enough so the fight would never happen. Some things that I saw about these rituals binding people together in the community, I saw that it brings a sense of identity to people because they're tied back to their ancestors, and in these days, we're not as much tied to our ancestors or living out their mission or legacy, but in the Mari culture, it gave the tribe almost an identity and a purpose because they were tied back to their ancestors, and that's what I felt was really special with these rituals that they were doing in them. I also saw that in dark times, it helped the people come together because of how tight they were and how they continued with the rituals and the traditional things that their culture does. For example, when the whales came on the shore, the community all worked together, and when Pica went with the whale, and it was a very emotional time, and everyone thought she probably died, the boys that the grandfather was teaching, they started singing together during this emotional time, and you could just tell in that moment that those rituals really bring people together, especially in these dark times and in the happy times in their daily life, but especially in the dark times I saw in this film. And this reminded me of when I started going to church and I found a great community. We worshiped together, and that's what this kind of reminded me of, because I felt that the singing was very important to this community, and I noticed that I have that as something similar to that with my community. They are always there for me during hard times, and we worship together. And Pai's story impacted me because she continued to fight for something despite what others said of her, and that was something that was very admirable.